The Vikings didn't have pharmacies. They had something better. While we're rushing to urgent care for every wound and infection, they were crossing the Atlantic, raiding kingdoms, and surviving winters that would kill most of us today. Their secret wasn't luck or genetics. It was knowledge. Knowledge of plants that grew wild in the harshest climates on Earth, plants that could stop bleeding in minutes, fight infection without antibiotics, and keep warriors functioning through injuries that would hospitalize us. And here's what nobody tells you. Those same plants are still growing, still working, still waiting for someone to remember what they actually do. I'm Elias Thorne, and today, inside the Plant Vault, we're uncovering the plants that sustained the Viking world. These aren't decorative herbs or culinary garnishes. These are the medicines that kept Norse civilization alive for centuries, in conditions that would break modern society in weeks. No hospitals, no antibiotics, no emergency services, just knowledge passed down through generations, tested in the most brutal laboratory nature could provide. Scandinavia before the year 1000, 20 plants. Some you've walked past 1,000 times, others you've probably pulled from your garden and thrown away. All of them proven by the most demanding test possible, survival. Number 1, yarrow, the battlefield surgeon's apprentice. When a Viking warrior took an axe wound in combat, there wasn't time for debate or second opinions. There was yarrow, or there was bleeding out in the mud. Achillea millefolium got its name from Achilles, who supposedly used it at Troy. But the Vikings didn't care about Greek mythology. They cared that crushing fresh yarrow leaves and packing them into a wound stopped the bleeding faster than anything else they could find growing wild. The plant contains compounds that genuinely promote clotting. Modern research confirms what Viking healers knew. Yarrow shortens bleeding time. Warriors carried dried yarrow in their provisions specifically for this purpose, not as a backup plan, as the plan. The white or pink flowers grow on tall stems across meadows and roadsides. You've seen it. You just didn't know you were looking at a trauma kit. When someone was bleeding and miles from help, yarrow was the difference between making it home and not making it home. Number 2, plantain, not the banana, the weed growing in every disturbed patch of soil from here to Norway. Plantago major was so reliable for treating wounds, bites, and inflammation that Vikings called it way bread, the bread of travelers. Because when you're walking for days and you step wrong, or get bitten, or develop a blister that's turning into something worse, plantain is everywhere. The broad oval leaves can be crushed and applied directly to the injury. Within minutes, the pain decreases. The swelling responds. It's not magic. It's chemistry. The leaves contain compounds with genuine anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial effects. Viking longships didn't have medicine chests. They had knowledge of what grew wherever they landed. Plantain grows wherever humans disturb the soil, which means it literally followed Viking expansion across Europe. It earned the name white man's footprint in the Americas because it appeared wherever Europeans settled. But the Vikings knew it first as the wound dressing that required no preparation, no storage, no special handling. Just crush and apply. Number 3, nettle, the spring resurrection plant. After months of dried fish and stored grain, Viking bodies were depleted, vitamin deficient, weakened. Then, the first nettles pushed through the thawing ground, and suddenly people had access to one of the most nutrient-dense plants in the Northern Hemisphere. Urtica dioica is legitimately packed with iron, calcium, vitamins, and protein. The stinging leaves that everyone avoids are actually a defensive mechanism protecting an incredibly valuable food and medicine. Vikings harvested young nettle tops in early spring, cooked them to neutralize the sting, and consumed them as a revitalizing tonic. This wasn't symbolic. This was biochemical restoration after winter scarcity. Modern analysis confirms nettle contains significant amounts of nut, roots that would have been critically depleted by late winter. The plant also has anti-inflammatory properties that traditional Norse medicine recognized for joint pain and arthritis. Vikings who spent their lives rowing, fighting, and working in cold, damp conditions needed those anti-inflammatory effects. Nettle provided them. It still grows wild across the northern regions, still pushing up through the soil each spring with the same nutritional density it had 1,000 years ago. Number 4. Angelica, the protection plant with actual protective properties. Angelica archangelica was considered sacred in Norse tradition, associated with protection and vitality. But the Vikings didn't revere plants for purely spiritual reasons. They revered plants that worked. Angelica was used for digestive complaints, respiratory issues, and general strengthening of the body. The entire plant is aromatic, containing essential oils that have genuine physiological effects. The roots, stems, and seeds were all utilized. For respiratory congestion, the warming, expectorant properties helped clear airways. For digestion, the bitter compounds stimulated digestive function. Vikings who spent weeks at sea eating salt-preserved food and breathing cold, damp air needed respiratory and digestive support. Angelica delivered both. The tall plant with umbrella-like flower clusters grows in northern regions near water. It was valued enough to be deliberately cultivated, not just foraged. That tells you something about how essential it was considered. When a plant makes it into Viking cultivation, it's not decorative, it's survival. Number 5. Meadowsweet, pain relief before aspirin had a name. Filipendula ulmaria contains the same compounds that would eventually be synthesized into aspirin. Vikings didn't know about salicylates. They knew that brewing meadowsweet flowers into tea reduced fever, eased pain, and helped with inflammation. After battles, during illness, or for the chronic joint pain that came from their brutal lifestyle, meadowsweet offered relief. The creamy white flowers have a sweet, almond-like scent that made the tea pleasant despite its medicinal purpose. But this wasn't about taste. This was about function. Modern research confirms anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects from the compounds in meadowsweet. And here's the interesting part. Unlike synthetic aspirin, meadowsweet doesn't typically use the stomach irritation that aspirin is known for. The whole plant appears to have a more balanced effect than the isolated compound. Vikings didn't isolate compounds, they used the whole plant. Sometimes the old way works better than our attempts to improve it. What happened next changed everything the Vikings knew about surviving winter. Because the next plant didn't just prevent illness, it actively fought what killed more Norse settlers than any battle ever did. Number 6. Juniper, the purification plant that actually purified. Juniperus communis wasn't just burned for ritual cleansing. The aromatic smoke genuinely had antimicrobial properties that reduced airborne pathogens in enclosed spaces. Vikings who lived in longhouses with limited ventilation during brutal winters needed ways to manage air quality and prevent disease transmission. Burning juniper branches accomplished both. The smoke carried volatile compounds that inhibited bacterial and fungal growth. Modern analysis confirms antimicrobial activity in juniper essential oils. But Vikings also consumed the berries for digestive complaints and urinary issues. The berries have diuretic properties and compounds that support kidney function. For people eating heavy, salt-preserved foods through gout winter, supporting elimination pathways was crucial. Juniper helped flush excess salt and supported overall detoxification. The dark blue berries were also used to flavor preserved foods and fermented drinks, adding both taste and preservative qualities. When you understand that Vikings faced months of darkness, cold, and confinement with limited fresh food, juniper's multiple applications make complete sense. It wasn't one remedy. It was a survival system. Number 7. Garlic, the Viking immune system in plant form. Allium sativum appears repeatedly in Norse medical texts and archaeological evidence. Vikings knew that regular garlic consumption kept people healthier, particularly during the respiratory infections that swept through communities in winter. They didn't understand mechanisms, they observed outcomes. Garlic eaters got sick less often. Modern immunology explains why. Allicin and other sulfur compounds in garlic have broad-spectrum antimicrobial effects against bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Clinical research demonstrates enhanced immune function with regular garlic consumption. Vikings incorporated garlic into their diet deliberately, not just for flavor. They understood it as protective medicine. Raw garlic was consumed, garlic as cooked into stews, and garlic preparations were applied to infections. The plant grows easily in northern climates and stores well through winter. That combination of effectiveness and availability made it indispensable. When your survival depends on staying healthy enough to work, hunt, and defend your settlement, you don't ignore plants that demonstrably keep people functional. Number 8. Wild thyme. The respiratory warrior. Thymus sapilum grows low to the ground across rocky northern terrain, producing tiny purple flowers and intensely aromatic leaves. Vikings used thyme for respiratory infections, particularly the deep chest colds that could become fatal in harsh conditions. The plant contains thymol and carvacrol, compounds with proven antimicrobial and expectorant properties. Brewing thyme tea helped loosen congestion and fight respiratory pathogens. For people living in smoke-filled longhouses breathing cold air during outdoor work, respiratory support wasn't optional. It was survival. Wild thyme also served as a preservative in food storage. The antimicrobial oils that protected lungs also inhibited food spoilage. Vikings who understood this dual function used thyme strategically throughout their settlements. The plant's low-growing habit meant it survived harsh weather and could be harvested year-round in milder periods. That reliability mattered when you couldn't simply order supplies. You worked with what the land provided consistently. I'm Elias Thorne, and today inside the Plant Vault, we're uncovering the plants that sustained the Viking world. Not the mythology. The actual botanical survival systems that kept Norse people alive in conditions that would break most modern humans within weeks. These weren't decorative herbs. These were the difference between life and death. Number 9. Chamomile. The sleep medicine that restored fighting ability. Matricaria. Chamomilla appears in Viking Age archaeological sites, indicating deliberate cultivation or trade acquisition. Sleep deprivation impairs judgment, slows reaction time, and weakens immune function. Vikings who needed to remain alert for threats and capable in combat couldn't afford chronic sleep problems. Chamomile provided reliable, non-addictive sleep support. The flowers contain apigenin and other compounds that bind to receptors in the brain, promoting relaxation and sleep. Modern clinical trials confirm effectiveness for anxiety and sleep disorders. Vikings prepared chamomile tea before sleep, particularly during the endless daylight of northern summers when natural sleep patterns were disrupted. The gentle sedative effect helped maintain the sleep-wake cycles necessary for physical and mental performance. This wasn't about comfort. Warriors and settlers who couldn't sleep properly couldn't survive. Chamomile kept people functional when environmental conditions worked against natural rest patterns. Number 10. Mugwort. The digestive fortress. Artemisia vulgaris was called the traveler's plant because Vikings carried it on long journeys specifically for digestive support. The bitter compounds in mugwort stimulate bile production and digestive enzyme secretion. For people eating unfamiliar foods during travel or consuming preserved foods that challenged digestion, mugwort prevented the gut problems that could incapacitate expeditions. The plant also had traditional uses for menstrual regulation and as a mild nervine. Viking women who needed to maintain physical capability through childbearing and demanding labor used mugwort for reproductive health support. The tall plant with silvery green leaves grows prolifically across northern regions. Its abundance meant every settlement had access. Ancient Vikings dried mugwort and stored it for winter use, recognizing that digestive function often deteriorated when diet became monotonous and less varied. Number 11. Birch, the spring resurrection plant. Betula species provided multiple survival resources. In early spring, Vikings tapped birch trees for sap, a clear, slightly sweet liquid that provided hydration, minerals, and sugars after winter. This wasn't recreational. This was biochemical rescue. Scurvy and other deficiency conditions developed during winter. Birch sap contained vitamin C and minerals that began reversing those deficiencies immediately. The first fresh biological material available each spring, birch sap was consumed in quantity to restore physiological function. Birch leaves were also used for inflammation and urinary support. The bark provided material for containers, construction, and medicinal preparations. Vikings who understood birch as a complete survival system extracted maximum value from every part. The white-barked trees dotting northern forests represented renewal, restoration, and the resources needed to survive another year. Number 12. Dandelion. The liver support that prevented spring sickness. Taraxacum officinale emerges early in spring, providing bitter greens when almost nothing else is available. Vikings consumed dandelion leaves to stimulate liver function and support detoxification after months of heavy, preserved foods. The roots were also harvested, dried, and used as a digestive bitter throughout the year. Modern research confirms dandelion's hepatoprotective effects and support for bile production. Vikings didn't know about liver enzymes. They knew that consuming bitter spring greens made people feel better and prevented the lethargy and illness that often followed winter. The plant's deep taproot made it drought-resistant and reliable. That consistency mattered when food security was never guaranteed. Dandelion wasn't a weed to Vikings. It was a dependable ally that appeared precisely when nutritional rescue was needed most. These are the plants that kept the North alive. This is the Plant Vault. Disclaimer: this content is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Consult qualified healthcare professionals before using any plants medicinally. Number 13. Sorrel, the scurvy shield that saved settlements. Rumex acetosa emerges as one of the first edible greens each spring, and Vikings recognized it as essential medicine. The sharp, lemony taste that makes sorrel distinctive comes from vitamin C and oxalic acid. After months consuming dried fish, preserved meat, and stored grains with degraded nutrient content, Vikings faced spring with depleted vitamin C stores. Scurvy symptoms, bleeding gums, weakness, joint pain, began appearing in late winter communities. Sorrel reversed this progression immediately. Fresh sorrel leaves provided concentrated ascorbic acid precisely when bodies needed it most. Vikings consumed sorrel raw, cooked into soups, and preserved in fermented preparations. The plant's reliability and early emergence made it a cornerstone of spring nutrition strategy. Settlements located near sorrel-rich areas had measurably better health outcomes. This wasn't superstition. This was vitamin C deficiency prevention through targeted botanical intervention. The plant grows prolifically in meadows and disturbed soil. Its abundance meant even large communities could harvest sufficient quantities. Children were taught to identify sorrel early, ensuring everyone knew where this critical resource grew. Vikings who ignored spring greens suffered. Those who consumed sorrel thrived. Number 14. Rowan, the protective medicine with spiritual weight. Sorbus aucuparia held deep significance in Norse culture, appearing in mythology and protective rituals. But beyond symbolism, rowan berries provided real medicinal value. The bright red berries, too bitter and astringent to eat raw, were processed into preserves and medicinal preparations. Rowan contains compounds with antimicrobial properties. Vikings used rowan berry preparations for digestive upset and as a general tonic. The berries' astringency helped with diarrhea, a potentially fatal condition during travel or siege situations when clean water was scarce. The wood was carved into protective amulets, but this spiritual use didn't diminish practical applications. Vikings planted rowan near settlements deliberately. The trees provided medicine, the berries fed birds that controlled insect populations, and the wood served multiple purposes. Modern analysis shows rowan berries contain vitamin C, organic acids, and polyphenols with genuine biological activity. Vikings who incorporated rowan into their health practices weren't just following tradition. They were accessing compounds that supported immune function and digestive health through harsh conditions. Number 15. Elder, the fever fighter that defined survival. Sambucus nigra stands as one of the most important medicinal plants in Viking pharmacy. The creamy white flowers and dark purple berries both provided critical interventions for respiratory infections and fever. Elderflower tea induces sweating, helping break fevers through the physiological cooling mechanism of perspiration. for Vikings dealing with influenza-like illnesses in crowded longhouses during winter. Elderflowers provided one of the few effective fever management tools available. Fever that couldn't be controlled led to delirium, dehydration, and death. Elderflowers saved lives. The berries, rich in anthocyanins and vitamin C, were prepared into syrups for immune support and respiratory infections. Vikings consumed elderberry preparations at the first signs of illness, recognizing that early intervention prevented progression to more serious conditions. Every part of the elder tree had uses. The wood was carved, the leaves used externally, the bark in specific preparations. But flowers and berries were the medical treasures. Settlements ensured elder trees grew nearby. The plant's value made it semi-sacred, protected and cultivated deliberately. I'm Elias Thorne, and today, inside the Plant Vault, we're uncovering the plants that sustained the Viking world. These weren't decorative herbs or optional supplements. These were the difference between survival and extinction in one of Earth's harshest environments. Number 16, horseradish. The sinus weapon that cleared infection. Armoracia rusticana delivers one of the most intense physiological responses in the plant kingdom. The volatile compounds in fresh horseradish root, primarily allyl isothiocyanate, create that unmistakable sinus-clearing sensation that makes your eyes water and your nasal passages open instantly. Vikings used this reaction therapeutically. Respiratory infections that produce thick mucus and sinus congestion could progress to serious complications. Horseradish forced drainage. The root was grated fresh and inhaled, or mixed with food for internal consumption. The effect was immediate and undeniable. Beyond respiratory applications, horseradish has antimicrobial properties. Vikings included it in preserved foods, where it served dual purposes as flavoring and preservation aid. The compounds that create horseradish's intensity also inhibit bacterial growth. The root stores well through winter when properly kept cool and buried. This made horseradish available during the season when respiratory infections were most prevalent. Vikings who maintained horseradish supplies had a tool for managing the colds and infections that spread through winter settlements. Number 17, celandine, the external healer with necessary caution. Chelidonium majus produces bright yellow sap that Vikings applied to warts, skin lesions, and fungal infections. The plant's name derives from ancient associations with swallows and seasonal healing, but Viking use was purely practical. Celandine sap contains alkaloids with antimicrobial and caustic properties. Applied externally to unwanted skin growths, it causes tissue breakdown and removal. Vikings used this for cosmetic and medical purposes, removing warts and treating skin conditions that could become infected if left untreated. The critical limitation was external use only. Celandine is toxic internally. Viking knowledge systems included clear warnings about which plants were dangerous if consumed. Celandine was valued precisely because its toxicity made it effective externally, while everyone understood the boundaries of safe use. Modern pharmacological analysis confirms celandine's antimicrobial alkaloids. The traditional external applications align with the plant's chemistry. Vikings weren't guessing. They were applying botanical compounds to specific conditions through careful observation and cultural knowledge transmission. Number 18, willow. The pain relief that sustained warriors. Salix species contain salicin, the compound that later became the basis for aspirin synthesis. Vikings didn't understand the chemistry. They understood that willow bark tea reduced pain, fever, and inflammation. Warriors with injuries, farmers with chronic joint pain, anyone suffering from inflammatory conditions used willow bark preparations. The effect wasn't instantaneous like modern pharmaceuticals, but consistent use provided measurable relief. Willow grows abundantly near water sources. Its availability meant pain relief was accessible to most communities. The bark was harvested, dried, and stored for year-round use. Preparation involved steeping the bark in hot water for extended periods to extract the active compounds. The anti-inflammatory effects helped with everything from headaches to arthritis to recovery from injuries. Vikings who could manage pain remained functional. In survival situations, functionality determined outcomes. Willow bark kept people working when pain would otherwise have been incapacitating. Number 19. Iceland moss, the lung medicine from volcanic earth. Citraria islandica isn't actually moss, but a lichen that thrives in Iceland's harsh volcanic landscape. Vikings recognized it as powerful medicine for respiratory conditions, particularly the deep coughs and chest congestion that followed cold exposure. Iceland moss contains polysaccharides that soothe inflamed mucous membranes and have genuine antimicrobial properties. Vikings prepared it as a thick decoction, sometimes with honey, for persistent coughs and respiratory infections. The lichen was also consumed during food scarcity. It provided calories and nutrients when other sources failed. This dual role as medicine and emergency food made Iceland moss extremely valuable. Collection required knowledge of proper identification and preparation. The lichen needs thorough washing and soaking to remove bitter compounds before use. Viking communities in Iceland and northern regions maintained this knowledge carefully, passing it through generations as essential survival information. Number 20. Sea buckthorn, the northern superfruit that restored vitality. Hippophae rhamnoids thrives in the harsh coastal environments of Scandinavia, producing bright orange berries packed with vitamins, antioxidants, and omega fatty acids. Vikings recognized sea buckthorn as restoration medicine, something that rebuilt strength after illness, injury, or the depleting effects of long winters. The berries are intensely tart, almost unbearably sour when eaten raw. Vikings mixed them with honey or other foods to make them palatable. What mattered wasn't the taste, but the effect. People recovering from scurvy, weakness, or prolonged illness showed measurable improvement after consuming sea buckthorn regularly. Modern nutritional analysis reveals why. Sea buckthorn contains more vitamin C than citrus, significant vitamin E, carotenoids, and rare omega-7 fatty acids. This combination supports immune function, tissue repair, and overall vitality. Vikings didn't have these terms, but they observed that people who consumed sea buckthorn during recovery periods healed faster and regained strength more completely. The plant grows in sandy, rocky coastal areas where few other food sources exist. This made it valuable in regions with limited agricultural options. Communities near sea buckthorn groves harvested berries in autumn, preserving them through winter as both food and medicine. Sea buckthorn oil, extracted from berries and seeds, was applied to wounds and burns. The fatty acid content promotes skin healing and reduces inflammation. Warriors with burns or slow-healing injuries used sea buckthorn oil topically while consuming the berries internally. This dual approach addressed healing from multiple angles. The thorny branches made harvesting difficult and dangerous. Vikings developed techniques for safe collection, often using tools to shake berries loose rather than hand-picking from sharp branches. The effort was worthwhile because sea buckthorn provided concentrated nutrition when bodies needed it most. What you've just seen isn't folklore. It's infrastructure. These 20 plants weren't optional. They weren't decorative. They weren't natural alternatives. They were the difference between continuity and collapse. The Viking world wasn't sustained by mythology. It was sustained by applied knowledge, tested in cold, in famine, in war, and in isolation. When something worked, it was remembered. When it didn't, it was forgotten. That filtration process created a survival-based pharmacopoeia built on results, not theory. Modern science now confirms much of what they already knew. Willow reduces pain. Garlic fights pathogens. Yarrow stops bleeding. Elder supports immunity. The chemistry hasn't changed. What changed is our distance from it. These plants still grow, still produce the same compounds, still respond the same way when properly prepared. The difference is knowledge. The Viking relationship with plants wasn't mystical. It was pragmatic. They didn't ask whether something was natural. They asked whether it worked. That mindset matters. Relearning plant knowledge isn't about rejecting modern medicine. It's about expanding capability. Because resilience is layered. Modern healthcare is powerful, but it's also centralized, industrialized, and dependent on infrastructure. Viking medicine was decentralized. It grew in fields, along coastlines, in forests. It regenerated every spring. That kind of resilience looks different. It means knowing what to reach for before panic sets in. It means understanding your landscape instead of being isolated from it. It means recognizing that survival knowledge used to be common, not specialized. For most of human history, plant literacy was normal. Children learned to identify leaves before they learned to write. Communities knew which tree bark eased pain and which berry restored strength. That wasn't niche information. It was foundational. And when that knowledge fades, dependency increases. What the Viking world teaches us isn't to romanticize the past. It teaches us that durable civilizations understand their environment. They don't outsource every solution. They don't assume stability. They don't wait for systems to rescue them. They build knowledge that regenerates. Botanical knowledge regenerates. Seeds drop. Roots persist. Perennials return. The same compounds that closed wounds in the year 900 are present right now in roadside yarrow. The same salicin that eased a warrior's inflammation still exists in willow bark. The same immune-supporting anthocyanins still glow deep purple in elderberries. Nothing about the plants changed. Only our relationship with them did. And rebuilding that relationship isn't about living in the past. It's about widening your margin of safety. Understanding plants doesn't make you primitive. It makes you adaptable. It means you recognize options. It means minor problems don't escalate unnecessarily. It means small injuries don't automatically trigger dependence. It means you carry capability instead of outsourcing it. The Vikings survived where others didn't because they understood the systems around them. Not symbolically, practically. That's the lesson. These plants kept the North alive. They still grow. And knowledge, once remembered, doesn't disappear easily. This is the Plant Vault.